that they occupy 3 names.
Okay. All right. Now, was there more? Go ahead.
Well, you said earlier that you were talking about being representative for the average Dutch. I don't think I would fit that model very well.
Okay, how are you different than the average Dutchman as far as political opinion and philosophy goes?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily different on certain... I tend to disagree with everybody around me, so it's... I don't know if it's a typical Dutch thing that their stance is typically Dutch and I don't agree with it, but... oh wait, now Andrew is saying that someone's mic sucks.
Uh-oh.
I don't know why, because what I'm hearing is fine.
He's probably hearing the clicking and the popping, which is a limitation of my bandwidth. I don't think there's anything we can do about that. You sound good to me.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I listened to it again. It sounds fine for me, but...
Okay.
Apparently Andrew isn't getting the same quality.
Yeah, because on the call earlier, his voice was breaking up too, so maybe that's something to do with his feed. Anyway.
Yeah, I think he's on his phone. It might be something to do with that.
Okay. Yeah, it must be something like that, because I think it sounds pretty good. But RD, we were going to get into Terrance McKenna. He's your hero. How did this happen? I mean, you were telling me that a few years ago, let's give people a little backstory here, which is, I hate using buzzwords, but that one's a pretty decent one, backstory. You were a pretty, what we would call in America, a right-wing, hyper-conservative, didn't really like or trust anybody. Like, you thought the Muslims were all evil and were going to get us, and you believed in the doomsday prophecies and that we needed to create shelters and stuff. Maybe that's a bit extreme. You can clarify. How did you change and why did you change? How could you change in such a short period of time to being more open-minded and, I would call it, philosophically neutral compared to what you were?
Yeah, I guess I fell in the trap of that keeping everything like it is or like it was is a good idea, you know. It's pretty easy to fall for that, especially when you see things around you change rapidly. You kind of want to hold on to what you got, or you're gonna think that everything in the past was better. And yeah, I think it was the I don't know. We talked about a lot of stuff last time. I don't mean the last show, but the other time we talked. And it were documentaries like the one I mentioned to you about the global warming thing. I don't know if you've seen it already, but for me that was kind of an eye-opener. And then after that, Douglas Rushkoff, who came on Dutch television and pretty much talked about what money and economies are really like, and how money is used and abused to shape society. It was just made me think in a different direction. I always knew that the center was something I didn't want to belong to. So it was either the right or the left extreme. And yeah, maybe now I've went from the right to the left, but I see it more as a circle anyway, because I think that extreme right and extreme left often have a lot in common.
I think you're right. You know, it's funny because in America, these two groups are at each other's throats, but the left isn't much of a fighting group, in my opinion. The right is a fighting group. I mean, they're enraged about everything. And I look at life in America and I'm asking myself, there's some things we should be concerned about here. There are some things, but what is with the rage? And this whole, there are these base concepts you find. Everybody's sheep. Nobody thinks for themselves. People on the left just want to do wealth redistribution. If you can't survive, you ought to die. That's, you know, Darwin's law at work. And that goes for even a civilized country. Oh, you're going to die of healthcare because you don't work? Well, too bad for you. You should have worked. You should have found a way to make money. It's a capitalist society, and if you can't make it, you can't make it. Don't swim with the big fish. And to me, I always find myself finding merit in some of these arguments, and it pushes me back toward the middle because I can find merit on both sides. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, and I think that's the problem. Everybody thinks there's one right answer to all major topics. But what if there's not? What if there's 3 or 4 right answers? Why do we have to always narrow it down to one? And this thing Terrance McKenna's talking about, which I want to get more into, why you sort of turned on. What was it about Terrance McKenna that got you interested in him?
Wow, that's a lot to think about. Well, speaking about politics you were talking about, I think that something that is on the extreme right or left doesn't really matter which side it's on, but for it to be extreme, you have to be far removed from like what is average. And I think what is average in the States, it's considered pretty right wing here in Holland. So it's already, I don't really think you have much of the extreme left in Holland is pretty regular, you know. It's closer to the norm than the right is, and I think in your country it's the other way around, that the right wings are closer to the center really than the left is, and so
the center moves back and forth in this country pretty often. About every 20 years you see it shift. But
yeah, the average. I mean, yeah, they're still saying that our sound is not okay, but they'll deal with it. They're saying. But about McKenna, I think I got the one I mentioned earlier, Douglas Rushkoff. He was a fan of Robert Anton Wilson, and I think that's how I got into the McKenna circuit. It's like when you dive into these videos on YouTube, you kind of get linked towards, and yeah, once I hit McKenna, it was like, this is, I get this, you know, this is so weird, this is making me feel comfortable.
You don't think that McKenna, it seems to me like part of the foundation of his argument is that if you don't experiment with psychedelics, you're probably not going to reach a total truth. Is that true, or am I going overboard there?
I think it's what it stands for. I mean, it's about deconditioning, about it's about seeing things from a different perspective, you know, trying to view things. If you want to see things outside of your own culture, it's pretty hard, you know, because you carry that culture with you. And what I hear in these talks and these also other people that have experimented with these psychedelics, which I haven't, so I still relate to it. But what they say is that it strips you from your culture, you know, it strips you from your bullshit, so to speak. So it gives you a different outlook, and it helps you to dissolve boundaries, which I think you can do in other ways than using psychedelics.
Yeah, so you think Barco's saying that McKenna mandates drug use, but I think what you're saying is it's more symbolic. You have to remove yourself from the norm in some way or another in order to open up your mind. And if you don't do it with drugs, you need to do it with thinking.
For example, I mean, in one of his talks, McKenna also says that traveling is like being on psychedelics in a way, because you go from one language domain to another, and it helps you to see how relative your thinking really is, how related it is to your cultural thinking.
Yeah. Well, you know, he was talking about relativism earlier, and how relativism is an excuse to be any way you want and see that as not wrong. And I want to play a little bit more of this clip. I'm going to try to play it while we're talking and see if that works. we should be able to talk over it and interrupt it and stuff. So let's see what happens here. All right, I'm going to mute my mic and see if that.
It's a problem, especially in California, where this thing has gone from being a pathology to the defining mode of normalcy. But it allows stuff like Heaven's Gate. It allows Jonestown. Nobody ever said to those people, "You're full of shit." Don't think like this. This will lead.
Okay, the way it's working right now, RD, I'm going to have to play some and then we talk about it. So I'm going to mute the mic so we can do that, all right?
Sure.
But you can hear this clip playing, right? So we can talk about it?
Yeah, we can talk about it later.
Okay, all right. We're going to play another chunk of this Calling Out People's BS by Terrance McKenna, and then we'll come right back, guys.
Instead, people said, "Hey, cool, see you in the sky." And people say, "Well, but now this sounds like you're advocating acrimonious and emotionally painful judgment making that will leave some of us disenfranchised from our belief in the space people or the presence of great Atlantis or something else that's very cherished." Yes. Yes. We have loosened our girding sufficiently, folks. We are now open-minded enough. You don't want to become so open-minded that the wind can whistle between your ears. And there are logical razors and rules of evidence that can be brought to bear on any situation. So, for instance, our culture is awash in claims of all sorts. Religious claims, the 1,000 various religious offerings on the market, and then it moves over into medical claims, dietary claims, claims of superior sources of knowledge. I can read the Dead Sea Scrolls, you can't. She's talking to the space people, you can't. This guy is accessing past lives, you can't. There are all these whisperings and intimations of special connection and uniqueness. If you are passive in the face of this, I think your intellectual arteries will just fill up with mental cholesterol, and eventually you'll have the equivalent of a coronary thrombosis at the intellectual level. It's very important to hone intuition and logical razors so that reasonable questions can be asked. And it may break the mirrored surface of we're all in it together, the illusion of community maintained by nobody ever criticizing anybody else. But this nobody ever criticizing anybody else brings the intellectual enterprise and the refinement of human knowledge to a screeching halt. The way in which the intellectual enterprise moves forward is by being critiqued, analyzed, subjected to tests. And, you've all heard me knock science, and I have many bad things to say about science. It has to answer for some of its sins. But the great thing about science, and the thing which makes it unique in the history of human intellectual endeavors, is it is a human intellectual enterprise in which you get lots of credit for proving that you're wrong. Science.
That's worth talking about. RD, can you still hear me? Are you there, RD?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay, let me ask you a question, RD. I haven't heard that much Terrance McKenna. What is his major problem with science? He's giving it some credit.